Do you know what makes an older man realize that family is not the safe place people always claim it is? It is not the day he is betrayed, not the moment he is humiliated in front of a crowd, but the moment he stands inside the house he built with his own hands, hearing the very people of his own blood discuss pushing him down to the basement to keep things tidy. And he understands. Sometimes the one who strikes you deepest is sitting right at the dinner table. If this story makes you pause at any moment, even if it is just a sentence that makes your heart tighten a little, an image that brings back an old ache, or simply the feeling that I have been there too, leave a single dot, so I know that you're on the other end of this story, seeing what I have seen and walking with me through the shadows many people choose to avoid. And before we step deeper into this journey, thank you, with all respect, for staying, for listening, and for giving me the chance to turn pain into something meaningful. My Victorian house in New Haven was built in the year 1897. The gray-blue paint has faded. The window frames still carry the wave patterns of the previous century, and the faint scent of old pine rises every time the dining room window is opened. I have lived here for 42 years. Every nail, every piece of wood, every gap in the walls. I repaired it with my own hands after my wife, Eleanor, passed away, and that evening I thought I was preparing a family dinner like any other time. I set the 40-year-old wedding china on the table, the set Eleanor once called the one thing that must never be thrown away. The warm glow of the French-style hanging lamp shone down, lighting the spiderweb-thin cracks on the old glaze. The cast-iron heater from 1903 still hummed softly, a sound that calmed me, though the kids called it old house noise. I had just placed the pot of clam chowder on the table when the door opened. Caleb walked in first. He is not exactly my son. He is my daughter Elaine's husband. And from the moment he steps into a house, Caleb can shift the atmosphere in the worst possible direction. I once hoped he would grow up with time, but people who are used to standing on others' shoulders rarely climb down on their own. Caleb looked around. Oh God, you still haven't changed these curtains? And that old wood smell, it feels like walking into a museum. I smiled, the kind of smile an old father uses to keep the peace for his daughter's sake. Lorraine, Caleb's sister, followed behind, her sweet, sharp perfume almost overpowering the smell of food. She glanced at the red and white gingham tablecloth and laughed. Wow, people still keep tablecloths this outdated? Are you preserving it like a museum artifact? Jasper, Lorraine's son, slipped in last, fingers glued to his phone, feet shuffling half a beat behind everyone else. What I felt wasn't about the tablecloth. It was about that patient, practiced tone of condescension, a tone I had heard for years, but tonight it cut deeper. Jared, Lorraine's boyfriend, tall, overdressed, wearing a half-smile, stepped in next. Uncle Lysander, honestly, you should consider a modern nursing home. At your age, living alone in a house like this, it's not safe. No one mentioned that I was the one who invited them. No one said thank you for dinner. I pulled out chairs and invited them to sit. The aroma of rosemary and warm butter drifted from the roast chicken I spent the entire afternoon preparing, but no one noticed. The dinner began like that, with gentle words that cut deeper than knives. Caleb took a sip of wine and then spoke loudly enough to drown out the heater. You know, this house, it really needs an upgrade. Elaine and I have been talking about it. If you just agree to sell, we could move somewhere better. I paused slightly. This house is the home of you and me, Elaine. Elaine looked down at her plate, saying nothing. A small silence, but enough for me to hear my own heart tighten. Then Caleb stood up, holding his wineglass as if opening a ceremony of his own. Oh, almost forgot. I have an announcement. The way he stood there under the warm light made it seem like he owned the house. The Gray Harbor resort trip next week is for immediate family only. He emphasized the last two words, looking straight at me. Immediate family, the direct family, not including me. I looked at Elaine, the daughter I raised alone, paid her medical school tuition, bought her first car, and spent half my life protecting. Elaine drew a small breath and said in a voice so soft it felt borrowed, "Dad, we need a break from you." Only 6 words, gentle, but enough to make this 128-year-old house feel like it had aged another century. No one noticed that I set my fork down more slowly than usual. No one saw my hand tremble slightly from restraint. They all laughed, talking more about the resort, about Nantucket beaches, oceanfront rooms, brunch menus costing hundreds of dollars. And then, the final sentence of that evening placed a cold stone on my chest. I stood up to clear the dishes when I heard Caleb speak quietly, but loud enough to slip through the half-open kitchen door. After the trip, we force him to sell. Then we move into the new place. No more dealing with him. Lorraine answered, "Yeah, just let him know his place." I did not step out. I did not say a word. I simply stood in the old tiled kitchen, my hand resting on the sink where Eleanor used to stand every morning, letting the cold of the metal seep into my skin. It is strange. The moment people break you is not the loud moment. It is the moment when all the sounds around you suddenly disappear, leaving only a silence, so painful it feels like you stopped breathing. That night, I washed the dishes with slightly trembling hands and realized something more clearly than ever. It was not this house that was getting old. It was the people at that dinner, falling from the place where I once put them. And they had no idea. They had just opened the door to a decision that would change their entire lives. As I climbed the stairs, I heard one more sentence, the final one that snapped the last strand of my endurance. "After this trip, we make him sign. If he won't sign, we force him. This house belongs to someone who knows how to use it." I stopped on the old wooden staircase, my heart squeezed tight, and right there on the 14th step, I understood that my silence was the only thing they were exploiting. That night, New Haven sank into a heavy kind of silence, the kind carried by old houses that have witnessed generations of arguing, loving, and then betraying. I walked into the study at the end of the hallway on the 2nd floor, the room that used to be my workspace when I taught history at Yale. The room still kept the Edison-style warm light Eleanor liked, a soft, unshowy glow that reminded people of the things they tried to forget. I turned on the light. A warm pool spread across the dark shelves, the tied stacks of files, and the walnut desk with a long scratch, the mark from the time Elaine practiced writing with a steel pen at 5 years old. That warmth could not ease the cold creeping into my hands since hearing Caleb's words downstairs. I went to the corner where the steel file cabinet stood, the one I bought at an old library auction in Rhode Island. The cabinet weighed nearly 100 pounds, made in 1892, its mechanical lock still perfect, something I trusted more than people. I turned the dial, listened to the familiar soft click, and pulled it open. Inside, the folders were arranged by year, type of asset, and every transaction I had ever signed or helped the family with. The second drawer from the top held 3 large envelopes, each labeled with a property name, Fleetwood House, New Haven, Cape Cod Inn, Barnstable and Federal Hill Duplex, Providence. I pulled out all 3 deeds, original notarized ownership papers with raised seals and security fibers glowing under the warm light. Everything was still there, exactly as I had kept it for years. None of them knew, none had ever asked, that I still owned everything, had never transferred even 1 inch of land. The New Haven house Caleb wanted me to sell. It was never something anyone could force. The next drawer held a small microfilm box I had kept since 1993. The first year I started recording every tax, bill, and receipt after Eleanor died. I put the reel into the old reader. The gray screen showed faded lines. Property tax, house tax, roof repair, pipe repair, Elaine's first-year college tuition, her car payments, everything. 40 pages, almost 3. Decades. And I remembered countless times Elaine said, "I think Caleb understands the value of what you do." I had believed it. Now I wasn't sure. I took a thick ledger from the bottom. That brown leather notebook was a habit from my graduate study years. Write everything down to avoid forgetting. I turned the pages, each number carefully written in a fountain pen. Month, year, note, who received it, and why. I added them to my head. Total, $96,000. That was how much I had quietly supported Elaine and Caleb during 8 years of their marriage. Covering Elaine's credit card debt 3 times, contributing to 2 down payments, helping with Lorraine's medical bill when she lost her job, and many small expenses Caleb never mentioned. I stared at that number for a long time. It didn't make me poorer, but it made me understand something else. People never value what is too easy to receive. I set the ledger aside and turned on my forensic document scanner, the one I used when examining rare papers at book fairs. I opened the Documents from Elaine folder, where I stored the scans she had shown me last month. She said Caleb was helping her parents with finances and sent them to reassure me. I had noticed something odd in the signature, but didn't want to doubt my own family. Tonight, I had no reason to look away. I activated the ink layer scan. The screen showed each stroke, then separated each layer. And finally, the signature, Lysander F., appeared with clear signs. Uneven pen pressure, incorrect ink density, and the curve of the letter F was completely unlike mine. Caleb had given Elaine paperwork with a forged signature, preparing something, maybe a power of attorney, maybe consent to sell the house, maybe a credit card guarantee. I didn't know, but my son-in-law was doing what a decent man would never do, manipulating his wife with finances and using my name to legitimize it. My cheeks burned. For the first time in years, I heard my heartbeat pounding, like the sound of a courtroom gavel striking a table I had never been invited to, yet somehow was already convicted in. I opened my email and checked recent messages. Then I saw it, a plane ticket confirmation. Nantucket, Gray Harbor Resort, sent to Caleb, Lorraine, Jared, and Elaine. Departure next week. Ticket class, oceanfront package. I opened the details. There was an attachment, the itinerary. I thought the pain came from being excluded from immediate family. But this email showed something worse. Caleb had not only excluded me from the trip, he had used my home address as the billing address and used a newly opened card. I remembered the ledger entry, the card Elaine called family expense card. Now I knew who truly used it. Scrolling to the bottom of the email, I saw the small printed line, Nantucket property, Gray Harbor Private Resort, for sale. I went still, and in that moment, a cold line ran down my spine, not from the weather, but from the naked truth. The vacation Caleb was taking my daughter on was also where he planned to finalize a deal, meet a broker, and buy a property using my money. I placed both hands on the edge of the wooden desk and exhaled. Not long, not deep. Just enough to push every hesitation out of my mind. If they believed I could simply be pushed aside, then it was time for them to learn how wrong they were. As I moved the cursor to the transaction section, the screen showed the small line no one in my family knew. Gray Harbor Private Resort, for sale. I froze, and in that instant, I knew. I would get there first. It was late at night. My regulator wall clock showed 1:47 a.m., the second hand stepping forward with a steady rhythm that sounded like the ticking of a decision I could no longer delay. The warm yellow light in my study was still on, casting deep brown tones across the desk and making the whole room feel like an old courtroom where I was both judge and defendant. I sat down and opened my laptop. The line, Gray Harbor Private Resort, for sale, still glowed on the screen as if mocking my years of softness. Staying silent to keep the peace, enduring so my daughter wouldn't be caught in the middle, hoping people would eventually understand the kindness I'd given. But tonight, after hearing Caleb whisper about forcing me to sell my house, I understood that my silence only made them believe I could be pushed aside. I opened my contacts and scrolled to one name, Martin Hale, Providence Trust Bank. I've been a banker for 15 years. I hit call. The phone rang 3 times before a sleepy, gravelly voice answered, Lysander? Good Lord, it's past 1:30 a.m. What's going on? I need to open a new credit line, I said, my voice low but firm, against the Cape Cod Inn. A few seconds of silence passed. Then Martin shot upright, like someone had splashed cold water on him. You want to use the Cape Cod Inn as collateral? Yes. Lysander, the last appraisal was around 1.9 million. How much of a line are you trying to open? As much as you can within 48 hours. Martin sighed, but he didn't argue. He knew I wasn't impulsive. I heard him typing on the other end. With the current appraisal and your credit history, I can get you a line of roughly 1 million, but I need a legal reason to justify it to the board. I'm buying another property. I looked at the resort listing, and I need to move fast. Martin stopped typing. Lysander, what exactly are you trying to buy? A place, I said, far enough to teach people their limits. I heard him adjust his posture. You need me to push this through now? Tonight, I'll come to Providence tomorrow to sign. His voice dropped. All right. But promise me one thing. Don't let anyone use you again. There's only one thing you need to know. This time, I'm the one taking the initiative. When the call ended, I reopened the financial spreadsheet. Numbers that were usually cold suddenly lit up like pieces of a plan I'd never dared consider. The resort was listed at 2.4 million. My available cash, 1.5 million. Money I had never touched because I thought I would leave it to Elaine. The line Martin was opening for me, roughly 1 million. I added it in my head. No calculator needed. A straight line, clear as the yellow light on paper. Enough. Enough to turn everything around. Enough to show them they misjudged this old man. Enough to rebuild the boundary I should have drawn long ago. Those numbers, usually emotionless, became the heartbeat of a growing decision. I was no longer defending. I was going on the offensive. I opened my contacts again. There was one more person I needed to call. The only one I trusted for complicated deals like this was attorney Rhea Donovan in Nantucket, a woman with the cold hands of the law, but a warm enough heart not to become an opportunist. I met Rhea nearly 12 years ago when I tried to buy a small plot in Siasconset for Eleanor. She was the one who spotted a forged seller's signature and saved me from a notarized scam. From that day, I learned that some people don't owe you anything, but still choose the right side. 26 years of handling coastal property, practically living in the salt wind of Nantucket, and the only person who never asked me the question everyone else did. Why does an old man in New Haven need more property? She was exactly who I needed for this battle. I called. Rhea picked up after the second ring, her voice remarkably alert. Lysander, if you're calling at this hour, something big is happening. I want to buy the Gray Harbor Resort. A long pause. 5 full seconds. You're joking. The listing has been up for barely 10 hours, and you haven't even seen it. I'll be there in a few hours. Lysander, she exhaled. You know a resort deal takes time. Just the legal check takes 7 to 10 days. And you're saying, I want a preliminary agreement within 72 hours. 72 hours is insane. Enough to teach them a lesson. Another pause. Rhea understood me better than most. All right, she said. I'll start checking the title deed, liens, and licenses now. But you need to get here before anyone else bids. I will get there before them. When the call ended, the warm light in my study felt a little brighter. Maybe because for the first time in years, I felt myself standing, not begging to be treated better, but claiming the respect I deserved. I opened the airline website. The 6:10 a.m. flight was at the top. The book button glowed. I placed my finger on the mouse, inhaled once, and clicked. The ticket confirmed. 6:10 a.m. to Nantucket. A small line appeared on the screen, insignificant to anyone else but a verdict underlined for me. I would arrive 6 hours before them. In that moment, I knew this game no longer belonged to them. The Gray Harbor listing had gone up the previous evening, just as I was reviewing suspicious card transactions linked to my home address. Back then, it was just one more line buried among dozens of alerts. Now, it was a destination. The Nantucket wind touches the skin in a way that is entirely its own. Not freezing, not harsh, but as if it carries the memory of sea salt, old wooden ships, and summers that passed 100 years ago. When I stepped off the 6:10 a.m. flight, the morning light was so thin I could see individual grains of mist floating in the air. I pulled my coat tight, breathed in deeply, and felt one clear truth. I had arrived 6 hours before them, and those 6 hours alone were enough to rewrite the future of the entire Morton family. The taxi took me along the beach road before turning onto a narrow wooden path marked by a faded sign, Gray Harbor Resort. The name sounded luxurious, yet everything before me looked like a place that had survived too many seasons without a caretaker. The deep blue ocean stretched out far ahead, waves rolling softly over white sand, but the wooden bridge leading into the resort had already lost its color, several planks so rotted that a light tap made dust fall off. The wind pushed through, making the old mooring ropes creak, the sound of a place worth far more than its appearance suggested. The glass door of the reception area opened with a small metal bell. Inside, the air smelled of old wood, seawater, and a faint mustiness from the carpet. On the wall behind the counter hung a 1950s map of Nantucket, its corner peeling slightly. A silver-haired woman stood up, her tired eyes still carrying the gentleness of someone who had spent a lifetime in hospitality. "I'm Martha Ellison," she said, extending her hand. "You must be Mr. Fleetwood." "I am. Thank you for waiting for me this early." Martha smiled. "You are the only person who has ever called me at 3 a.m. in my 40 years working here." It didn't sound like a complaint, more like she had been waiting for someone who understood Gray Harbor's worth, rather than viewing it as a liability. She led me down the main hall. The wooden floor creaked softly under each step. Every room we passed showed signs of fatigue. Sun-faded curtains, scratched tables, bedside lamps with uneven light, but I didn't see deterioration. I saw opportunity. "Martha," I said as we stopped before an oceanfront room, "this place, it must have been beautiful." "It was," she sighed, "but I've lost my strength. I lost my husband last year, and I can't keep this place afloat. This resort deserves a new owner." She opened the door. Ocean light flooded in, spilling across a bedroom with an old balcony coated in salt. The wind pushed the curtains gently. The sea opened wide in front of me like an invitation. In that moment, I understood. Under the right hands, Gray Harbor could be stunning again, even more than before. We sat at the small tea table near the reception. Martha placed a stack of papers on the table. Title deed, tax reports, maintenance logs, and a list of rooms needing renovation. "I'll be honest," she said, looking at me with the sincerity of someone ready to let go but determined to choose the right successor. "I accept the listed price, but I want the buyer to understand this is not just a transaction. It's a responsibility." "I understand," I said, and I truly did. I saw this resort the way I saw my own life, once neglected, once underestimated, once treated as though it had lost its worth, until someone realized certain things endure. "Within 48 hours, I can sign a preliminary transfer," Martha continued, "fully legal, but full closing will take 7 to 10 days, and your attorney will handle the legal checks." "I want operational control transferred immediately," I said, "starting today." Martha blinked, surprised. "Right away?" "I have a reason." I didn't elaborate. She didn't press. People who have lived long lives know when to trust silence. We signed the preliminary P&S draft that Rhea sent from the Nantucket office just 20 minutes earlier. Martha extended her hand. I took it. Her hand trembled slightly but was warm, the hand of an older woman handing over the last child of her life. The back door of the reception opened. A young woman walked in, hair tied up, eyes sharp like early morning light. Her outfit was simple but precise. White shirt, black trousers, low-heel shoes. "This is Amanda Pike, the resort's general manager," Martha said. "If you want to run things immediately, she's the one you need." Amanda looked me over, not judging, but assessing the way people in service learn to read competence in seconds. "Where do we begin, Mr. Fleetwood?" "With priorities." I opened my notebook. "I need 3 things right away." Amanda nodded. "First, all oceanfront category rooms, oceanfront suite, deluxe oceanfront, panorama view, must be temporarily closed. Reason: pipeline repairs. Write it exactly like that." Amanda wrote quickly without asking why. "Second, list new pricing for 72 hours, not targeting anyone specifically. Just a general adjustment to match the resort's condition." "Understood." "Third, anyone who booked an oceanfront room before this, if their card still works, issue an automatic refund difference." Amanda studied me for a few seconds. "This isn't just operations." "It's not." I looked directly at her. "This is about boundaries." Amanda nodded slowly. "I understand." We returned to the reception to review the reservation system. Amanda opened her laptop, fingers moving quickly and precisely. The booking list appeared. I skimmed through the names. Then my eyes froze on one line. Morton Party, Deluxe, Oceanfront, Suite. Check-in Friday, 3:20 p.m. I felt my breath slow. Amanda looked at me. "You know them?" "Yes," I said, my voice calm enough to feel cold. "Very well." Their name sat there, Morton Party, and they would never expect who was waiting for them at this place. The next morning, the return flight to Connecticut landed in the thin afternoon sunlight, and I stepped off the plane unnoticed, exactly the way I wanted it, with no family members, no words of concern, and not a single glance realizing I had just placed a deposit on a resort they still believed was a privilege for the young. I took a taxi back to Maplewood Road, stood in front of the Victorian house from 1897, looked at the faded gray-blue paint Eleanor once chose, and understood that what I was about to do would change everything forever. 2 weeks earlier, when I noticed Elaine avoiding my questions about the bills, and Caleb suddenly showing an unusual amount of concern about future planning, I had sensed something drifting off its normal course, only a first intuition, while the truth would break open that night. I had no proof, then, only the instinct of a father who has lived long enough to know when his home is being eyed by someone else. So I quietly asked an attorney to draft this set of documents, but I had not signed it. Tonight, every intuition had become truth. I opened the drawer of my desk and took out the thick envelope, Fleetwood Irrevocable Home Trust, a trust that cannot be changed, cannot be revoked, and cannot be forced into transfer. I called Mrs. Clarice Morton, the notary I trust the most, the one who has certified my papers for 3 decades. "Clarice, tonight I need a verification for a special set of documents." She only replied shortly, "I will be there in 20 minutes. I laid out the documents, the clause stating that the Fleetwood house belongs to the trust and cannot be transferred. No one, including heirs, has the right to force a sale. All disputes are void, and anyone residing in the house has no standing as a co-owner. Clarice arrived, and we signed. The red seal pressing down on the paper made a short, sharp thump, like a line cut cleanly between past and present. When she left, I placed the trust envelope beside me to store in the 1892 steel cabinet, but something made me stop and check the mailbox. I opened each envelope until I froze at an unfamiliar stack of papers. 3 notices from a credit card company. Name of applicant, Elaine Morton. Billing address, my address. Date opened, 7 months ago. Outstanding balance, $36,800. I stood still. not because of the amount, but because of the act. Elaine had used my address to open a card, and Caleb may have been behind it. Everything I had done tonight was right. I brought the stack back to the table and placed it next to the unopened trust envelope. 2 sets of papers, one protecting me, one betraying me, lay side by side like 2 sides of the same story. I did not call Elaine, did not confront her, did not grow angry. There was only a silence as cold as tempered steel. As I stepped into the hallway, the wooden floor gave a small creak. Caleb was standing at the far end, phone against his ear, his voice low but clear enough. After the vacation, forcing him to sell the house will be done. We moved to the new place. No need to deal with him dragging things out. Lorraine replied on the other end, "Yeah, just push him out quickly." I stood in the dark, not stepping out, not entering their conversation. Tonight, I didn't need to say anything. Documents would speak for me. I tightened my grip on the trust envelope and knew they had just locked the last door that could have kept them in this house. The morning they were preparing to leave New Haven, the Victorian house had a kind of silence that was hard to describe. Not the stillness of peace, but the kind of quiet people make when they are rushing away from a place they no longer respect. I stood on the steps, watching Elaine pull her suitcase down the stairs, the small wheels making the familiar clacking sound on the wooden steps. Years ago, when she was little, I'd carried that very suitcase when taking her to New York to study medicine. And today, I was helping her carry a suitcase for a trip she deliberately excluded me from. Elaine walked closer. "Dad, can I leave my things here?" "Yes," I said, my voice softer than I wanted. I bent down to fix the corner of her coat caught in the zipper. A small action, but every movement felt like stretching out something I was about to lose. I let a little sadness show, not to create pity, but to make my daughter understand that every action she took had consequences. Someone would be hurt. Caleb stood by the door, spinning the car key in his hand like someone eager to depart. He looked at me for a few seconds, enough to notice my silence, but not enough to understand what it meant. Lorraine was busy checking in the flight on her phone. Jasper was complaining that the morning dew had stained his new shoes. All of them, people following a fancy trip they believed they would enjoy, had no idea about the trap waiting for them in Nantucket. I lifted the last suitcase onto the step. Elaine placed her hand on my shoulder, so lightly it felt more like obligation than affection. "Dad, stay home and rest. Don't think too much." I gave a weak smile, the kind an old father gives when he feels left behind, but still tries to be polite. "Just enjoy your trip." And only I knew their trip would be the biggest lesson of their lives. They got into the car. Caleb sat in the driver's seat, wearing sunglasses as if preparing to play the role of a successful man. Lorraine shoved her bag into the trunk. Elaine turned back to look at me one last time. I raised my hand to wave, quietly with a slight bow, the posture of a father enduring. They saw an old man standing alone in front of a big house. They believed I would stay here, with sadness. The car left the driveway. I watched until the taillights disappeared behind the trees. The moment the last wheel vanished, I turned back into the house and closed the door. No emotion, no trembling, no regret. I picked up my phone and opened the taxi app, but not the company they had just used. A different company, a different driver, a different route. "I need to get to Tweed New Haven Airport right away," I said. Just 8 minutes later, I was in the car. The older driver looked at me in the mirror and smiled. "Heading out early today, huh?" "I have business in Nantucket," I replied, "and I need to get there before certain people." He did not ask more. Experienced people usually know when not to step into someone else's story. I arrived at the airport before 7:10. The airport was small but convenient. I went straight to the check-in counter for a lightly booked commercial flight, departing 6 hours earlier than the Morton party's flight. When the plane took off, I looked out the window, the thin clouds gliding past, the light falling on my tightened hands. Not worry, determination. 2 hours later, I stepped into Gray Harbor Resort, for the second time that week. Amanda Pike was waiting for me in the lobby. "Mr. Fleetwood, the staff has gathered fully as requested." "Good," I nodded. "Let's begin." The meeting took place in the small lounge room where the cracked leather sofa Martha had kept for 20 years once sat. Light streamed through the large window onto the faces of employees, still sleepy, but full of curiosity. Amanda stood beside me, holding a clipboard. "Since this morning," I said, "this resort will operate under a new process. This is not cutting down, this is restructuring." As I said yesterday, the meeting took place in the small lounge room, the employees standing in a half circle, faces still drowsy, but eyes curious. Amanda stood beside me, holding the clipboard. "As I told you yesterday," I began, my voice steady, "we are not changing anything except 3 things. Temporarily closing all oceanfront rooms for pipe repairs, adjusting the rate board correctly for 72 hours, and letting the system automatically refund any difference for cards that are still active. No exceptions. No private explanations for anyone." Amanda nodded, quickly scrolling through the items on the screen. She didn't need me to repeat anything. All of it had been set up since the day I first stepped into Gray Harbor. This was just pressing the button. "You are very clear," she said softly. "I don't like chaos," I replied. "Every chaos only gives bad people the chance to invent stories." At 8:59 in the morning, Amanda pressed send. The system reported sent successfully to all registered guests. A small line of text on the screen, but to me, it was a boundary. From that second, everything at Gray Harbor would operate legally, properly, just like any resort in peak season. No one was named. No one was singled out. If anyone felt targeted, that was because they recognized their own shadow in the light. Amanda checked her watch. "The Morton party's flight seems to be boarding." I opened my phone and checked the flight tracker. A green dot blinked. Then the line appeared, "Departed, on time." I narrowed my eyes slightly, feeling time tilt just enough for me to hear my own pulse. That afternoon, the Nantucket sunlight slanted through the wide lobby windows of Gray Harbor Resort, the golden light breaking into streaks across the white seashell walls, like an old-fashioned stage preparing for a performance only I knew the script of. I stood tucked into the right corner, my hand resting lightly on the faded wicker chair, feeling the coolness of the wood and the sea salt air clinging to the atmosphere. From that position I could see everything, every step, every glance, every smallest movement of a space waiting for a moment to shatter open. The glass door swung open, and the Morton family walked in with the posture of people who believed the world was born to welcome them. Caleb in front, his eyes inspecting every corner of the lobby as if checking a property belonging to him. Lorraine pulling her blush-pink suitcase flauntingly. Jasper, awkward as always, moving out of rhythm, and Elaine trying to smile, trying to seem at ease. Caleb saw me first. The moment he froze lasted only a single breath, and immediately afterward, that familiar, careless smirk curled at the corner of his mouth. "Oh, for God's sake." This creepy old man followed us. His voice was loud enough that people near the reception desk turned their heads. He noticed their eyes and pushed his voice even louder, like a man who believed the room existed for his performance. "He seriously thinks he belongs here? Look at him." His gaze swept over me, a look meant to crush someone's dignity just by his existence. "He's not part of our family. He never was." Lorraine cut in, shrill, sharp, shallow, making several staff members pause mid-check-in. "Security! Someone get him out. What is he doing here? Following us all the way to the island? Is he insane? Why did you follow us all the way here?" Phone cameras clicked. Several guests began recording, thinking this was just an incident of removing a troubled elderly man. A young couple nearby whispered, "Poor old guy." But Caleb heard it, turned around with a crooked laugh. "Don't pity him. He's been a burden for years." I stood still, not responding, not defending, not explaining. My silence made Caleb even more satisfied. He thought that silence was the sign of a man about to break. "I swear," he said, pointing right at me, "if he keeps stalking us, I'll file a restraining order. Old men like him need to know when they're not wanted." The words fell like sharp pieces of glass, freezing the air. An older man frowned. A woman on the right lifted a hand to her mouth. Caleb turned to them, laughing. "He's not my father. Not in any way that matters." Elaine paused very slightly, like a breath slipping, but still said nothing. Lorraine continued. "Security. I want him out. Now. Right. Now." Jason, the security staff, walked over. Steady steps, serious expression. He looked at me, then at them. The air tightened enough that you could almost hear the sound of a string pulled too far. And then, as if timed for that exact second, the manager's office door opened. Amanda Pike stepped out, not rushed, not startled, but with the posture of someone who knew she held the most authority in the room. "What's going on here?" she asked, her voice low and sharp like a thin blade. Caleb seized the moment like someone afraid of losing his spotlight. "That old man is trespassing. Get him out. We are paying guests. We don't want trash standing in our lobby." The word trash hit the stone floor like a slap in broad daylight. An elderly woman nearby placed a hand on her chest. A receptionist dropped her pen. Amanda looked directly at Caleb for a beat, then turned to me. Her eyes held restrained respect, not showy, the kind of respect from someone who understood your true position in the room. She set her clipboard on the counter, stood straight, and pronounced each word clearly, her voice strong enough that even the waves outside seemed to pause to listen. "Mr. Fleetwood is the new owner of Gray Harbor Resort." The lobby sank into absolute silence. Not empty silence, but the kind that arrives when shock wipes out every other sound. Amanda continued, slow, cold, precise. "If anyone has to leave this resort, it is definitely not him." Caleb's face changed colors in 2 seconds, red to purple, then pale as though all blood had drained out. Lorraine froze like a plaster statue forgotten in the sun. Jasper stepped back as if afraid he was standing too close to an explosion without armor. Elaine looked at me, her look a mixture of disbelief, confusion, and a faint pain she didn't know how to name. Guests in the lobby began whispering, but this time about them. They just insulted the actual owner? This will spread across the whole island. How humiliating. Jason, who was about to remove me less than 2 minutes earlier, immediately straightened his stance and bowed his head slightly. "Sorry for the misunderstanding, Mr. Fleetwood." I responded with a very small nod, not forgiveness, but acknowledgement that the room's true order had returned to its rightful place. Amanda turned to Caleb, her expression courteous to the point of cruelty. "Please move to the waiting areas while we recheck your booking." Caleb Morton, the man who had just called me trash in the lobby, was now being asked to sit and wait, like a guest unqualified to stand in the lobby of the resort I owned, and all of Nantucket had witnessed it. The Morton party dragged their suitcases to the reception desk in a silence heavy with humiliation, the kind of silence people wear after being unmasked in public, but still trying to rebuild their pride from whatever scraps remain. Amanda remained impeccably polite when she said, "Standard garden view, your room is ready." That sentence made Caleb's face twitch as if slapped with ice. "What room type? We booked deluxe oceanfront." Amanda turned the screen toward him, pointing at the email, sent at 8:59 that morning. Lorraine tried to argue. "We didn't get any email." But the system displayed clearly, sent successfully. No denying, no table slamming, no acting. They had no choice but to take the room keys. The room opened with just enough light to expose the full truth. A small room, slightly old carpet, a ceiling fan humming softly, a window facing a dark garden instead of a bright ocean view, a fall from fantasy straight into reality. Lorraine stood in the center like someone stripped of a fake queen's crown. Jasper tugged the curtain so hard the rod almost fell. Caleb tried to request a refund, and the system responded with a single word: declined. Not because the resort rejected it, but because the bank had temporarily frozen their card due to credit risk. The refund was still processed in the system, but it could not return to an account that was currently locked. The money still went to the original card, but since all their cards were under review for outstanding debt, they could not access a single dollar. Caleb threw his phone onto the bed, his face burning red. This damn resort is playing us. But the truth was harsher. They were playing themselves. The Wi-Fi was a joke. Garden View was in the farthest corner of the resort, where the network still ran on old infrastructure. Caleb connected and got one shaky bar. Jasper opened his laptop and froze at the homepage. Lorraine stared at the signal icon and exhaled sharply, as if weak Wi-Fi were a personal insult. Everything was legal. No technician interfered. No settings were altered. They were simply living at the exact level they had never accepted they belonged to. The next morning at exactly 8 o'clock, the maintenance team began pipe inspection. A schedule Martha had kept for 15 years, not off by even a minute. The sound of tools tapping against the wall jolted Caleb upright, thinking it was 6 in the morning. But the clock showed 8 o'clock. Lorraine held her head like she was being tortured. Jasper whispered, "But Uncle, they're working on schedule." Caleb couldn't find anyone to blame. Standing at the door with clenched fists and eyes burning with the fury of someone being forced to live like an ordinary person for the first time. By noon, the Gray Harbor restaurant looked as beautiful as a painting. Linen light, distant waves, glass clinking softly. But when the bill landed on the table, Lorraine's eyes shot open. $120 for 3 dishes? Amanda appeared as if the universe had summoned her at the perfect second. Prices were posted 72 hours ago by regulation. Another email, another legal procedure, another dead end. Caleb stared at the bill as if it were a sentencing document for his own arrogance, and in that moment, the pride he had worn for years cracked into 100 pieces. That afternoon, Caleb stood in the lobby, eyes tracing the ceiling as if trying to connect invisible dots. Eventually, he muttered a single sentence, quiet but sharp as steel thorns. "Something's off. This isn't random. Someone is doing this." I stood on the second floor behind the wooden railing, the sea breeze drifting through and lifting the linen curtains. He looked up. Our eyes met for a moment that felt like a whole year, and I knew the thought forming in his mind frightened him more than anything else. Every coincidence in Gray Harbor had an author, and that author was me. That evening, the Gray Harbor restaurant was so beautiful that anyone walking in without knowing what had happened in the lobby a few hours earlier would have thought it was a place for people living the happiest days of their lives. Low, warm lights reflected off the dark wooden tables. Wine glasses caught the last sliver of sunset. Knives and forks clinked softly like water touching stone. Everything was perfect, except the Morton family's table. I walked in after them, silent. I chose the farthest corner table, where the dim light and the thick linen drapes hid half my face. In front of me was the file concerning the transfer of ownership and operations. All I needed to do tonight was sign. Not to brag, not for anyone to see, but to acknowledge one truth. The game at Gray Harbor was played by rules I wrote. The Morton party sat at table number 12, dead center, so anyone passing by would see them. Caleb sat facing the entrance, Lorraine on his left, Jasper on his right, and Elaine across from him. When the server brought the menus, Caleb let out a low laugh, quiet but still meant for others around him to hear. "At least the restaurant looks decent." The voice of someone trying to glue together a pride that had cracked in the lobby. They ordered 3 main dishes, 2 sides, and a bottle of wine. I watched them from afar, like actors attempting roles they weren't capable of carrying. Elaine forced a smile at the server. Lorraine scrolled through her phone to make sure no one had caught an unflattering angle during Amanda's takedown, and Caleb kept fixing his hair to regain confidence. 1.5 hours later, the bill was placed on their table. $210. Not pricier than usual. Not cheaper. Exactly the amount posted 72 hours earlier. Caleb picked up the bill as if it were a summons from court. $210 for 3 dishes? He burst out. Lorraine touched her neck, her voice tight. Just pay it. Please don't make a scene. Caleb pulled out his wallet, took out his card, and set it down. Swipe it. The server smiled politely and nodded. I lifted my eyes slightly, watching through the window's reflection. Everything unfolded exactly as I predicted. The card reader beeped once, declined. Not a bell. More like a coffin lid snapping shut on his pride. The server checked again, speaking softly but just loud enough for the nearby tables. Sir, the card isn't accepted. Caleb froze as if punched in the chest. Lorraine's hands shook, making her water glass tremble. Elaine's face flushed red as she lowered her head almost under the table. Caleb whispered, breathless, Try again. The server did. Declined. The couple at the next table glanced over. The woman covered her mouth. The man raised an eyebrow. I sat still as though it had nothing to do with me. I signed 2 more pages of the operations file, the ink gliding lighter than the humiliation crushing Caleb. Use another card, Lorraine hissed. Caleb pulled out a second card. The server swiped. Declined. A silence fell on their table like a stone dropping into a dry well. Elaine bit her lip and turned away. Jasper shut his eyes like he wished he could disappear. Caleb had no face left to shout with. Lorraine pulled out her wallet. Still not enough. Elaine finally had to use her emergency backup card with a tiny limit. The wine had to be left behind. 2 side dishes canceled. They had to split the bill into 2 separate charges. I heard Lorraine's ragged breathing, Caleb's teeth grinding, and a spoon dropping. Small sounds, but to me, louder than the ocean outside. But the real humiliation wasn't over. That night, in their room, the Morton party wrote a 1-star review on the resort's website. Terrible room. Weak Wi-Fi. Overpriced. Unprofessional behavior. They wrote it all. Amanda posted an official response. Polite, precise, quoting the 72-hour policy, the maintenance schedule, and industry standards. No attacks. No snark. Just light held straight up to the darkness. The irony? Other guests read the review and liked the resort even more. They praised the professionalism, praised the transparency, praised the seriousness of the operation. The Morton party's 1-star review became an indirect 5-star review. I sat on the small balcony of the resort, watching the lighthouse glow reflect across the water. The pen in my hand still held warm ink. I had finished signing every document needed for tomorrow's operations. Amanda stepped out onto the balcony. Mr. Fleetwood, she said softly, the Mortons are asking about early checkout. I didn't answer. I simply looked toward the horizon, where the sea and sky touched in a dark blue line. A light breeze passed through. The moment I heard they wanted to check out early, I knew their attempt to flee was far worse than any $210 bill. On the morning the Morton party decided to check out early, the Gray Harbor lobby was busier than usual. New guests wheeled suitcases through the doors. A few families were taking pictures against the shell wall, and sunlight struck the reception desk, as if intentionally making everything clearer than normal. I stood on the second-floor railing, holding a cup of tea, watching from afar. Caleb stepped to the front desk first, his face trying to regain the posture of a household patriarch, but tightening like someone hiding something cracking inside. Lorraine followed, gripping her bag so hard her knuckles were white. Jasper walked with his head down as if counting every tile. Elaine moved slowly, looking tired and ashamed. Amanda opened the bill, and the moment the number $4,620 appeared, Caleb's face changed. 4,000, 620? For what? His voice rose loud enough that 3 nearby check-in tables stopped what they were doing and looked over. Amanda remained calm. Everything was posted 72 hours ago and sent by email. An older couple waiting in line behind them exchanged a look. The wife whispered, "Oh dear, money trouble again." Caleb pulled out his card, placing it down with the last effort to preserve dignity. Amanda swiped. The machine beeped. Declined. A woman in the waiting area almost spilled her latte. Lorraine let out a small sob, her hands shaking like someone losing balance on a narrow bridge. Caleb's face flushed red, trying to act composed, but his voice nearly breaking. "Try again?" Amanda swiped a second time. Beep. Declined. 2 young men near the doors murmured, "Whoa!" The second card failed too. One even tilted his phone as if ready to record the drama. Caleb inhaled sharply, pulled out a third card, a bitter smile crossing his face like someone slapped a second time. "This one will work." But when Amanda swiped it, the machine paused for half a second, then gave the third beep, the coldest and sharpest. Declined. This time the entire lobby turned. A mother and child stopped pulling their suitcase and stared at Caleb with a mix of pity and disbelief. The child whispered, "Mom, why can't that man pay?" Lorraine covered her face. Jasper turned away. Elaine bit her lip. Caleb froze in place. Lorraine trembled. I only have 600, Jasper muttered. "I don't have enough either." And in front of dozens of guests, Elaine, the only one who had never insulted me, quietly opened her wallet, pulled out her low-limit backup card, and placed it on the counter with trembling hands. "This card still has about 5,000. The lobby air thickened. No one said it aloud, but everyone saw the truth. The only person holding the family together, and the only one paying, was Elaine. Amanda swiped. The machine lit up. Approved. Some guests let out a small, relieved breath, but the Morton party looked as if every layer of pretense had been stripped away. And just as they finished signing, Jason stepped beside me and spoke quietly so only I could hear. "Mr. Fleetwood, they're asking if they can get a discount because they are family to you." The lobby below still held the eyes of people who had just witnessed a family collapse at the front desk without anyone touching them. I set my teacup on the railing, the steam dissolving in the air. I looked down at the lobby and said, my voice calm but firm as the sea when the tide recedes, "Family is the people who know how to respect each other." I paused, and they do not. Jason bowed his head. "I will relay that exactly, sir." Below, the Morton party, heads lowered, steps disordered, quietly pulled their suitcases out of the resort under the silent gaze of everyone present. New Haven greeted them with a gray afternoon, a cold kind of light that seemed determined to expose every consequence they had dragged back from Gray Harbor. The rental SUV stopped in front of the house, its tires still wet from a thin rain. The Morton party, who had left this house looking like people who believed they were above its owner, now returned as 3 silhouettes shrunk by humiliation that had not yet faded. The wooden door opened. The familiar hallway leading to the kitchen still carried the scent of the morning soap from the day they left. But there was something new, lying right in the center of the dining table, on the oak surface Elaine used to wipe every evening. A cream-colored envelope. The recipient. Elaine Morton. The line below. Only open as a household. Lorraine slowly pulled out a chair. Caleb dropped his bag onto the floor, face empty. Jasper stood by the doorway, not stepping in. Elaine reached out to touch the envelope as if it might burn her fingers. She opened it. Inside was a thick stack of papers, notarized, bearing the title, Fleetwood Irrevocable Home Trust. The room suddenly felt colder. Elaine turned the first page. Her voice trembled as she read line by line, and every sentence hit like a hammer, striking everything they believed they owned. All ownership rights to the house at the New Haven address are transferred into the Fleetwood Irrevocable Home Trust. Elaine swallowed hard. The property is fully protected, cannot be forced into sale, cannot be refinanced, cannot be modified, cannot be compelled into transfer. Lorraine pressed a hand to her chest. No, that can't be. No individual, including heirs, has the right to dissolve or alter the trust. Caleb jerked his head up, face turning pale. What? No individual? The only person granted lifetime residence. Lysander Fleetwood. In that moment, the ticking of the wall clock fell one beat at a time, like the knocking of fate. Elaine turned the page. The next lines were ones they never imagined they would read. Beneficiaries of the trust after the founder's death. Nobody among the Morton family. Nobody. Not the daughter, not the son-in-law, not the grandson. Not a single person. Lorraine whispered, voice breaking. What? What have we done? The words echoed through the large house like hollow bells, each syllable bouncing off the walls. The memories, the years they had spent treating this man the way they did. Elaine turned another page, this one printed in bold with a red notarized border. This trust is nearly impossible to contest in court. Any legal attempt is void unless a fraudulent imbalance of legal process exists, which does not apply here. All three stood frozen. Every plan to push the father into the basement, every insult, every scheme is to force a sale for a better lifestyle, now turned around and closed on them like a trap. Caleb was the first to break. He slammed his fist into the wall, the impact loud enough to make the hanging light tremble. What trick is he pulling? No way he can take everything. He struck the wall again, the second hit sliding off the surface, sending him collapsing to the floor like a man stripped of his future. Lorraine fell to her knees beside a chair, hands covering her face. We treated him like a monster, and now he's gone, taking the whole house with him. Jasper said nothing, just stood there breathing like a weight was crushing his chest. Elaine, the only one still mildly composed, read each line again, confirming there was no exit, no detour, no crack left for them to cling to. Then she picked up her phone. Her hand shook so violently she nearly dropped it. Finally she called. The screen showed. Dad. She held the phone to her ear, voice small like someone speaking from the mouth of regret itself. Dad, I'm sorry. I need to talk to you. Please pick up. The ringing echoed in the empty room. 1 ring, 2 rings, 3 rings. Nothing but silence. Caleb looked up, waiting. Lorraine wiped her tears. Jasper clenched his hands together. 4th ring. 5th ring. No one answered. Elaine inhaled, trying to steady her breath. She called again. The ringing continued. Still going. Still empty. Eventually the call dropped. Voicemail. Elaine set the phone down on the wooden table, right on the spot where Lysander used to sit every evening to read the paper. No one spoke. No one dared look at anyone else. After a long moment, one sentence fell into the room like a stone dropping into a dry well. He isn't answering. Lysander did not answer, not because he didn't hear, but because he had been silent long enough, and now it was time for them to feel the emptiness they had created for themselves. 3 days later, Gray Harbor still glowed with the kind of morning light unique to Nantucket. Light filtered through sea mist, through weathered wooden railings, through linen curtains that lifted gently with the breeze. I sat in the smallest room of the resort, the room Martha once used for logging notes and scheduling maintenance. The desk was cluttered, yet I felt an unusual quiet, a quiet no longer painful, only carrying the salt of the ocean and the breath of decisions already completed. While I was jotting down new operational adjustments, a knock sounded. 1 knock, soft, unhurried, the kind of knock from someone who had cried too much to knock any harder. I opened the door. Elaine stood there. No makeup, dark circles beneath her eyes, hair tied in haste, her entire body drained of color. Dad, Her voice was hoarse and small. I stood still, hand on the doorframe. Elaine swallowed deeply and said, I know you don't want to see me, but I had to come. I treated you like an object. The words fell like a cold gust. Elaine lowered her head and continued. I let them pull me along. I let them speak for me. I let them decide for me. And I stayed silent when you needed me the most. The hall breeze drifted in, lifting the fabric of the curtain as if the room itself were holding its breath for my response. I did not hug her, did not pat her head. I only said, I'm giving you one chance to start again. Not with Caleb, but with me. But it is the only chance. Elaine broke into tears, the kind of tears from someone who had just lost the life she knew and was standing at the threshold of a new one. In the past days, news from New Haven came nonstop. Caleb was called into his company, not for counseling, but to be told his contract was terminated. His boss said plainly, Your debt file was reported. You falsified expense entries. The company cannot keep you. The word fired dropped into Caleb's life like a hammer onto stone. He screamed at Elaine, at Lorraine, at himself, but no one believed him anymore. Lorraine and Jasper returned home, hoping to rely on their credit cards, but the cards had been frozen. The accumulated debt exceeded automatic limits. Lorraine cried, and Jasper curled up on the couch like a child abandoned, murmuring, Mom, we have no money left. That was not my revenge. It was life's revenge. After 3 days of thinking, Elaine said the next sentence that seemed to pull her entire body upright. I filed for divorce. She placed a photocopy of the filing on my desk. I asked, You truly decided? She nodded. I need to become a woman who stands on her own, not someone dragged by another person's voice. For the first time in years, I saw the Elaine of long ago, the little girl who sat beside Eleanor in the kitchen, who always placed the spoon in the exact right spot, who always said, Thank you, without being told. When Elaine left the resort, I stood on the balcony watching the taxi take her toward the ferry. I knew not every battle needed to be won with shouting. This one was won with silence long enough for someone to hear their own mistakes. That evening I walked down to Gray Harbor Beach. Late winter, gentle waves, water cold but kind. I stood on the wooden pier where Martha once handed me the keys, where Amanda nodded, where the resort began to change owners. Sea wind blew salt across my face. The pier lights stretched into gold streaks on the water. I closed my eyes, not to pray, but to remember. Life does not need to scream, I was betrayed. It only needs a trust document, a decision, and enough silence for truth to find its own light. I turned back toward the resort that now belonged to me. No glory, no applause. Just an older man walking along the wooden hall of Gray Harbor, knowing that finally everything had returned to its rightful place. If you have followed me to the very end of this story, I truly thank you. Not everyone has the patience to walk with a man through his darkest stretches, the stretch where he was pushed into his own basement, the stretch where he was humiliated before a crowd, the stretch where he stood in an empty house when everything felt lost. But then, light always returns, not a blinding light, the quiet kind owned by those who have endured enough pain to understand the worth of stillness. The light of a trust signed on the right day. The light of a father standing tall at Gray Harbor, knowing he has walked in the right direction. If this story touched you at any moment, even a sentence, an image, or a familiar ache in your chest, please leave a dot below so I know someone out there understands this feeling too. And if you want to hear more stories, journeys where justice is reclaimed through silence, through paperwork, through the clarity of someone who has been hurt, please tell me where you're listening from. I truly appreciate it.